Welcome to Better Than We Found It, the podcast for leaders driven to leave a positive mark through their leadership.
I hope that I will have created some ways in which the circumstances of your birth don't predict the opportunities you have in your life.
I'm Josh Huggins, your host and the founder of GS2 Partnership, a search firm committed to connecting visionaries dedicated to environmental and social betterment.
I have two young sons. I want to be able to tell them I did use the resources and expertise of a company to try to create more awareness about climate change.
In each episode, we delve into the minds of executive and future leaders. We discuss how sustainability guides responsible leadership, sparks change, and drives value.
The way of thinking I try and advocate is for us all to think about us having a collective problem to fix, which is climate, and that we need to rebuild our global economy.
We are GS2, and we are on a critical journey to connect to those who believe in leaving the world better than we found it. Hello and welcome back to Better Than We Found It, the podcast dedicated to showcasing career stories for purpose-driven leaders. On today's show, I'm delighted to be joined by Andrew Griffiths, who's the Director of Policy and Corporate Development at PlanetMark, a leading sustainability certification body. In this episode, we hear about Andrew's career journey and his varied experience that he has leading to PlanetMark, how he's strategically positioned himself to also focus on developing his own personal brand and how that's helped him in his career with the collaboration and partnerships that he's created, but also his view for the future of sustainability, the profession, and where this can go. So lots of tips and hints to learn from, some fun stories along the way as well, which I hope you'll enjoy. So let's dive right in. So Andrew, welcome to Better Than We Found It.
Thanks for having me on.
I'm glad we made it. But we were just recounting the story, and I suppose a little timestamp for me and the GS2 team talking about our new office move and the internet issues that we face. So hopefully we'll have no internet issues with the recording, albeit we both have them in our respective office moves right now.
It's the fun and games. How in 2024 we can be in a place where London-based offices are seemingly almost impossible to connect up to the internet.
Yes, and we're not going to solve that issue on the discussion today, but we are going to talk about an as interesting conversation, which is about you and your career. So I'm looking forward to it. Would you mind just giving an overview of yourself, your organisation, and the role that you undertake there?
Yeah, of course. So I'm Director of Policy and Corporate Development at PlanetMark. We're a sustainability certification. So we certify and support organisations to measure and reduce carbon every single year. Over 800 organisations and counting, from toy shops on Sheffield High Street through to Volvo, Fortnum & Mason, St Paul's Cathedral, the European Olympic Commission, all sorts, a real wide variety. And my role is really focused on helping our members and helping our teams understand and react to kind of policy changes and the implications that it will have for them and their organizations. And then also trying to kind of influence best practice as well, trying to lead the way and push things forward. And then also our partnerships function as well. So we work with a lot of different trade associations and wonderful relationships with organizations like the Royal Warrant Holders Association, Horticultural Trades Association, Advertising Association, all sorts. So we look after those relationships as well.
Excellent. Well, we're going to get into that for sure. But you have had quite a diverse career. And when I was prepping for this and when we had our first conversation, I think when I started scrolling on your LinkedIn, I could see how many different things you've been either doing as a job or part of your current role. I think it's ranging from psychology, you've had healthcare startups, now sustainability. Just as I suppose a broad topic, how do you think that the variety of the experience that you've had has helped shape your approach to sustainability today?
It's a good question. I think sustainability cuts across everything. So no matter what industry you're working in, sustainability is a relevant topic. Kind of like psychology is a relevant topic, no matter what industry you're working in. And so I think having practical experience within, a couple of different industries in my sort of the early stages of my career means that when I sort of did shift into sustainability, particularly in a way where we work with a lot of different organizations in different sectors in a consulting kind of format, it's very helpful to have had experience of kind of being on the other end of it and understanding what the stakeholders will want. Like, one of the companies that I used to work for is a Planet Mark member, in part because I tried to set that up. I was on the end of sales calls when I was there.
Well,
so
is this prior to you joining Planet Mark?
Yeah.
You remember?
Well, no, actually, ironically. So I tried to get the company I was at to become a member at that time.
Yes.
And they only became a member after I had left and joined Planet Mark. So they only joined after that. But then also on top of that, but I was in the orbit of Planet Mark for a couple of years. So I attended we have a Planet Mark Awards every year. I attended 2 Planet Mark Awards before I joined Planet Mark. Not because I was representing a member, just because Steve, the CEO, would invite me along. Just to come as a bit of a guest, but genuinely because I started going to sort of Planet Mark events that are being hosted and things, and I'm always someone who sticks around often till I'm one of the last to leave at a networking event or similar. So genuinely, there are photos of the Planet Mark team from 2 years prior to me joining Planet Mark that have me in them because I was the last one. And they were like, "Oh, come and join us in the photo," and I was invited to a team training session a year before I joined Planet Mark properly. Like, they just kept on inviting me to stuff and I kept on turning up.
Yeah, I'm trying to work out who's playing the long game here, whether it was them to know that you were going to be joining or you trying to do it as a sort of mini job interview on the way in, or maybe both sides.
It was actually both, because I met Steve when I was, so my first one I described as my baby director role. As an operations director of a startup called Yourtown, CIC, which definitely wasn't like it. It was me and a wonderful man called Mark White, and we would organise running clubs, walking clubs, cycling clubs, and then we'd do big running events with 1,000 people, closed road kind of events and stuff. So we had a lot of fun, but it certainly wasn't a career. And so I met Steve through that, and then he and I started meeting up every few months and just having coffee catch-ups and chats and whatever. And but I remember probably the week after we first met, we had a phone call because we'd met together with Mark talking about stuff we could do together between Yourtown and Planet Mark. And Steve, I remember Steve saying, I don't know, where this is going to go or anything like that, but I just got a feeling that we're going to work together, and it's good for us I want to keep in touch with good people. You seem like good people. I just have a feeling we're going to end up working together. And I was like, I feel exactly the same thing. Yeah, I would love that. And sustainability, I describe at that stage was an itch that I wasn't scratching enough. Like, I was always the person in a company who was like, "Oh, we should be recycling more. Oh, we should do this. We should do that." I was trying to do stuff, but it wasn't a formal part of any role that I held. And so when the opportunity to join Planet Mark emerged, which was shortly into the pandemic, I jumped at it.
Well, there's definitely a lesson there which we'll come back to that I advocate for individuals in their career, at all stages of their career, but to network and to be connected to a range of people, because you never know when opportunities can come up. And whilst as a recruiter, I would love that we are the center of the universe in the sense of any job move that happens. We know, we know that it happens through connections and networks, and hopefully we can play a part in that. But actually, a lot of the time it's from people that you meet, rather than seeing a job advert that you apply to, particularly for some of these more senior and interesting roles. So there's definitely something there to be learned.
Yeah, I mean, my first job out of uni was through a recruiter. That I got. I arrived. Where people say, "Oh, when you finish uni, a job's not going to land on your doorstep." You can't. You have to. I had a very different experience. I arrived home from university on a Monday. I received a phone call from a recruiter where I'd uploaded my CV to a couple of sites or whatever. I received a phone call from a recruiter on the Monday saying, "Would you like an interview on Thursday for a clinical admin role in this healthcare startup?" I said, "Yeah, sure, why not?" Had the interview on the Thursday. They said, "Do you want to start on the Monday?" So a week after I got home from uni, I was in a job and I did almost nothing to earn it.
Yes.
It was just because I had very relevant experience from my final year of university. So I'd done a lot of stuff during university. So I definitely think that is something, if you can have side jobs and get work experience and stuff during university, Yeah, it's no secret. That's helpful.
Yes.
That was so I that was the one time I had a recruiter place me in a role, and since then, I've not ever had to apply for a role, which is surprising given the number of roles I've held. They've all come through networking, knowing someone, or or incredibly random things like getting given I was given a business card by the CEO of a business whilst I was on a first date in an Indian restaurant. and I called him a year later and asked for a job, and he said yes.
That maybe the business card meeting maybe lasted longer than the date that you were on. Playing the long game.
It was. I mean, she asked me if I'd set it up to be impressive, because we were just sitting having a first date, and next thing I know, there's a middle-aged, slightly bald man standing next to our table, going, "Excuse me, I'm sorry, I couldn't help but overhear your conversation," and gave me his business card.
And what was the conversation that was happening to intrigue him so much?
So, important piece of context, particularly because this is, when people hear the topic, it'd be like, come on, is that first date conversation? It was 2 days before the EU referendum.
Right.
And so we were talking a bit about that and being like, what do you think is going to happen? And I was explaining what I thought was going to happen in the EU referendum and why. I was sort of leaning on my kind of psychology knowledge to be like, oh, people do this, people do that. I was completely wrong, by the way. My predictions were utterly wrong. I thought people would be change avoidant and would prefer what they knew. And no, it was, I was very wrong. But he overheard that and came over and he said, you seem very switched on. I'm always on the lookout for, bright people. I run a business not far from here. If you're ever on the look for a job, give me a call. And at that time, I was very happy. I was still at Orla Healthcare, the healthcare startup. So I didn't call him. I'd kept the card, always keep the card, but I didn't call him or email him or anything. So I didn't want to, open a door when I had no intention of walking through it. And but then a year later, healthcare startup, it's a risky business, and a sale of the company fell through, and the investors wouldn't put more money in. So that was my only experience of ever being made redundant, where we were all pulled into the boardroom on a Thursday and said, right, we're going to be out of a job tomorrow. Good luck, everyone. I called him after that and said, I don't know if you remember me, but you gave me your card at an Indian restaurant. And fortunately, it turns out he was a man with an impeccable memory. And he said, yeah, come in for a chat. Went in for a chat. He didn't really know where to place me. So he created a role around me and said, you don't really fit in any department, because I'd done lots of different things. And I've been doing a graduate management scheme where I moved around different departments. And so he just was like, oh, well, why don't we do something similar here? And, we'll move you around different. You'll start with the sales team, and then we'll go to operations. You'll do different things, different places, and just find ways to help improve things, do stuff. And then as you move around, we'll get a sense as to where we're going to put you. So I almost acted like an internal consultant, which was a wonderful learning experience, because you've got to see and learn so much from across a whole sort of quite, it was a sort of a medium-sized business.
Sure. And I think one of the things that stood out to me when we had our first call was you mentioned that early on in your career, it was quite important not only to work out what you wanted to do, but actually what you didn't want to do, and experience lots of different things to get to that. Could you share perhaps some of the things that didn't quite go to plan, or areas that you started to explore that you recognise this isn't my skill set or isn't what I'm passionate about?
Of course, yeah. I mean, so obviously I studied psychology at university. So I tested a lot of things around that, in that I tried my hand at, do I want to do clinical research? And I realized that I tried clinical research, also tried lab research. Lab research I tried, and I realized actually I'm quite a social creature. Just being alone in a lab, kind of pipetting things in and out of test tubes, it's not for me. It's interesting, but it's quite a slow process, and you really have to love that process. I much prefer reading the output of the research. If you don't love the process of doing the research, research not for you. So I learned from that I'm a social creature, so I like to work in teams, and I quite like things that I love learning things and discovery. And ironically, even though scientific research in many instances is how we learn and discover as a society, the process of it's actually surprisingly, you don't actually necessarily learn from the research that quickly, because you have to be so methodical in your approach to prove that the thing that you've learned is the thing that you've learned, that it takes quite a long time for you to kind of cement in that learning. So I tried my hand at that. Then I tried my hand at clinical psychology, and sort of I did a placement year in the NHS at the National Hospital of Neurology and Neurosurgery in London, and wonderful experience. I had a great time, and I got to sort of see what the life of a clinical psychologist might be like. But I sort of realised to go down that path, I was going to be in education till I was in my 30s, most likely. Just because you finish your degree, then you do a master's, then you do the clinical doctorate in psychology, and then you're 30 by the time you start working properly. And then also I sort of learned and sort of saw how clinical psychologists could rise within the NHS to a certain point, but they would then get stuck in a way that kind of medical consultants wouldn't. Medical kind of rise further. So it was one where I sort of saw that, and I was like, and I realized that the things I enjoyed most about my time there was the working with people, seeing meaning in my work, and solving complex problems, because I was a free resource that the teams could just kind of tap into. I got involved in quite a few like database projects, and so I set up a clinical sort of record system while I was there in Microsoft Access, and I didn't know how to use Microsoft Access. I was just a free resource, and I liked learning. So I went. They said, "We're running this whole service on a spreadsheet. Can you do something better?" And I went, "Yeah, I'll have a crack." So I picked up an old Microsoft Access sort of book, massive book thing my dad had, started learning, and went and built a database for them. So it was and so that's what kind of got me into doing some digitization type projects, and sort of seeing how much I enjoyed doing things which involved working with stakeholders in different places, and then acting as a force that kind of could gel them together, translate needs between kind of technical people and specialists working on the front line, and all of those sorts of things. So, I dabbled in a lot of different things, particularly through university years, which is a useful time to experiment because the stakes are very low. Yes. And then, when I came out from that, I was still mindful where I just fell, as I said, I sort of fell into a role with the healthcare startup, who then very kindly created a graduate management scheme around me to avoid losing me from the business. So, I've been very fortunate. I had a lot of people help me a lot along the way. But then when that went down, I mindfully and deliberately avoided applying for more healthcare roles because I wanted to diversify my experience and try something in industry. So I went to an electronic company. So I have been mindful about trying different things, and that has sort of led me down the path to figuring out where I really wanted to make a difference.
So you mentioned the story about meeting Steve and the sort of courting of each other, I suppose, prior to joining Planet Mark. So when the role came, tell me about how the role came around. So I think it's quite an interesting story there, and then we can talk about actually the journey in Planet Mark and a bit more about what you do there.
Yeah, of course. So Steve and I had been meeting up for drinks every 2 or 3 times a year for a couple of years. And I'd been going to Planet Mark Awards. I'd been to a team training session to learn all about the Planet Mark product suite. So I'd invested time and energy into showing that I was interested. And we had met up in the year COVID kicked off. We'd met up in January time I'd met up with Steve and Stephen Kirk, who was an investor and a non-exec director of the business at the Institute of Directors. And that was one of the reasons why Steve had shown a particular interest in me when we first met, was that my networking journey really got started within the IOD. I became a member. I've been a member for 7 or 8 years now. And I got very actively involved as a volunteer as part of the Young Directors Forum, we were organising 14, 15 events a year within the IOD and doing all sorts of stuff. Then I got involved in the London committee. I got involved in the Hertfordshire committee as sort of ambassador for young directors. And nowadays I sit on the IOD Council, and I chaired the IOD Sustainability Task Force for 3 years. So I have done a lot within the IOD, and that was of interest to Steve because he quite liked the idea of having a partnership with the IOD, which we now do, working with the IOD for 5 years. And so he'd sort of shown an interest in that, and so I've just been sharing my knowledge and expertise with him for free. I've just been sharing ideas. I've been talking to him about digitization. I've been talking to him about building communities, which was something that I'd spent quite a lot of time doing already at that stage, and really get involved in networking. So the way it happened was he texted me on a Sunday saying, "Hey, mate, you free for a catch up?" This is early stages of COVID. This is like May. So we're in lockdown.
Yeah.
Text me on a Sunday. I call him straight back. No time like the present. What do you want? And he went, "Well, we've been playing around skirting around the edges of this, but I think I need your skill set in the business now. Would you be willing to come on board?" I just went, "Yep." And he went, "Do you want to think about it?" I went, "Nope." No, I'm in. Count me in. I'm done. Yeah, sure, for sure. Yeah, so and that I never looked back. I joined the business in, I think, sort of end of June, 4 days a week initially, because I stayed doing 1 day a week at my previous role to kind of support them through. My immediate previous role at that time, I was project managing the launch of a research centre at Imperial College, looking at smart home tech for dementia, which was fascinating. It was just getting set up. So I was on a 6-month contract there. They offered me a 5-year contract that I then turned down because I wanted to join Planet Mark. So he offered me the chance to jump, and I jumped.
So what was the role that you initially came in to do? And obviously you've moved through several roles since then. So perhaps you could just give a quick journey of how the roles evolved, expanded and grown.
Cool. So when I joined, we were a 20-person business. So it was much smaller. We're now 80 people within an 800-person business. It's a very different landscape now. So I joined as Director of Digital and Community. So at that time, I was leading on 4 things. I was leading on sort of digital, sort of everything to do with the looking at how we were going to evolve the technology and digitization of the business. I was leading on the engagement team, which is kind of we had one engagement manager at that time. There's now all of these things are now their own dedicated teams within our business. So I led the engagement function. I led community, which was a new thing of like, let's think about how we make our members feel much more like a community, like we are convening them and bringing them together. And I led on partnerships. So those 4 kind of different strands. And then so I got stuck in, and then sort of within about 8 months, we recruited in Amelie as our head of engagement, and that function moved on from me. And then we recruited in Mark, who was our head of digital. And so it was one of these things where things would grow to a point where it would become unmanageable for me to cope with this number of different things. And then we would go, right, and again, I was very fortunate because Steve, as a leader and as a boss, has been very good with me in my own journey. Of at each stage where things would grow to the point where I'm like, we need more people on this. Like, I can't do all of this. We would go, right, well, what bits do you really want to? Where do you want to focus your time and energy? So I could have gone down the path of saying, I'll lead the digital function and the other bits will go away, or I can. Actually, no, I'm really enjoying the community and partnerships. So I really enjoy the community and partnerships. So I was like, I think we might be able to get a better suited person for the digital function. And so we recruited for a head of digital. So it's evolved quite naturally and organically, but my role now to the one when I started is completely different.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that mindset is The growth mindset of the organization and yourself is a really important one. Yeah, I have a board advisor, a non-exec director who works with me, and in scaling his business, another recruitment business is 450 people. His approach was always hire people better than you at the jobs that you're currently doing, so that you can then move on to something else.
I live and die by that ethos. I think that you can see people sometimes get kind of threatened almost if they're interviewing someone like, I think they might be better at my job than I am. Don't be like that. That's great. The more you can hire people who know more than you do, the better.
Yes, sure, absolutely. And I suppose in terms of the work that you've done around the brand of yourself and Planet Mark, there's lots that I can see from your LinkedIn and just the engagement that you have online. Something that stood out to me was the TEDx talk that you did around the power of meaningful networking, and how connections are so important. When you think about that in the context of sustainability, and I suppose from Planet Mark's perspective of building these partnerships and engaging communities and stakeholders, could you just perhaps give a quick overview of that concept and why that's so important to you?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think sustainability is inherently a social issue. It's sustainability and the climate crisis in particular. Climate crisis isn't being caused by anything other than society, by people, by the structures of our civilization. And so you fundamentally cannot address it in a way that does not involve engaging people, building relationships, and building partnerships and building community and connections. So it has to be that's the only solution in many ways, because we could bang our drum as loudly as we want to. If people don't come to the table to come and talk, learn, engage, and act ultimately, then what are we doing? So I'm a big believer in the power of networking. It has a stigma. I have a very different experience of networking in that I think networking can be utterly meaningful and not transactional. And that as soon as you make that transformation in your mind towards going, my job in any conversation, frankly, but certainly in a networking context, is to find something about this person that I find genuinely fascinating. And if I don't find it, that's my fault, not theirs. I haven't asked the right question. And really, seek ways to add value, seek ways to connect. And it's this additive thing over time. And I cannot emphasize enough the compound interest effect of investing in connecting with people, both colleagues at work, who might offer you roles further down the line when they join. I've had that happen to me. I've had random people at networking or Indian restaurants offer me jobs off of meaningfully connecting and sharing my thoughts and sharing insights with people, being out there and being helpful and giving your time and energy without expectation. I spent 2 years giving Steve free advice. I could have been trying to no, I need you to pay me 100 quid for that, piece of insight I'm sharing with you there. No, I just sharing. And there are lots of paths that won't bear fruit, but those that do, this compounding effect takes place, whereby I've been doing that for so many years now that there's this whole kind of reciprocity thing out in the world and out in the market now for me that makes things, I'm organizing a couple of webinars pre and post COP, the COP29 that's coming up, big UN international summit on climate change. And, our marketing team were like, we need to get some speakers on. We need to have people come. And I'm like, yeah, it's fine. I'll just get you some speakers. It's not a problem. And a lot of that confidence comes from I've done enough things with people, for people, and around people to try and be helpful and try and help them and try and do stuff. But I know that when I reach out, they'll probably return the favor.
Yes.
And it was one where, so this week I sent out 4 texts. I just WhatsApped 4 people who are all really amazing people, pillars of the industry, well-known faces from well-known brands. I just went, can you can you come and jump on a webinar with me on this day and this time? We'll have about 200 people tune in. It'll be great fun. It'll be wonderful to collaborate on something. And all 4 of them came back within 3 minutes and said, yes. That used to be much harder. 7 or 8 years ago, finding a speaker for an event was a pain in the arse. For me, like, it was much harder work. You had to graft. You had to really find people, sell to them. I'm going to make it a really good event. There's going to be really good people come along. I can't pay you any money, but please come and do something. And whereas these days, it's a world apart. But a lot of that it's a compounding effect over time, where you build up credibility and friendships of people who go, when you call, they pick up.
Yeah.
And that comes from being genuinely wanting to help and do what you can to help other people, so that when they call, you pick up.
Yes,
yeah,
for sure. And I think that's that's a thing that can help in any aspect of your life, but particularly from a career perspective, and if we think of it from a sustainability perspective, I think it's such a crucial skill, because, as you said at the beginning, sustainability is so cross-functional, and also it requires collaboration with such a variety of internal and external stakeholders. If you haven't done that groundwork of building those relationships, when you're then coming to talk to them about the material things around sustainability that really need their input and engagement on, if you haven't built those relationships and they don't quite understand it, it's very easy for people to just push it to one side and not get involved. But the best leaders of sustainability we see are ones that have got really entrenched relationships with individuals, so that they can use that to their advantage when they're then implementing something, or pushing to drive engagement around a particular topic. So I think it's a really good way of articulating it for, if you take it purely for sustainability, but also for your wider career and job search. I suppose, though,
it's the most valuable skill you'll ever learn. Genuinely, it's fundamental. Like, the whole idea, and even if you're in a B2B, like business to business type market, B2B is an illusion. People do business with people, and people work with people that they like, and that they feel a sense of kind of reciprocity and connection with. And that's kind of fundamentally what it comes down to. And even within kind of members, organizations who join the Planet Mark community, the number of times that the reason that they say they often come and sometimes spend a bit more money with us than they might with someone else, they say it's because of the people. They say, it's because I really like the team and I feel very supported by the team. When I call, they pick up. We really invest in that human element of this, where you need something where at the end of an email or a phone, you pick. Like, we're here if you're struggling, if you're trying to do something you don't know what to do. We're not going to kind of stick you in some automated engine or a wait queue type thing. We invest in having good account managers, good support systems and setups and services, so that we can point you towards where you're going to be able to get help from a real person.
Sure. Yeah, understood. I suppose on the flip side of creating these networks and collaboration and being involved in so many different things, and I was looking again at what you're involved in. You're involved in the Carbon Accounting Alliance. You've been involved in the UK Net Zero Carbon Building Standard, the UK Transition Plan Task Force. All these things are big. They're big programs of work, and you have a role to do in Planet Mark as well. How do you manage being part of so many different things and the diverse expectations that come with that, whilst also ensuring that you actually do have impact? Because I suppose there's always that thing of being involved in a lot but not actually delivering much, versus being really focused on doing something well. So how do you manage that?
Yeah. It's changed over time. When I first kind of was, had kind of side hustles, I guess, one of a better word, when I was getting involved in the IOD and other stuff like that, I was young. I had quite a lot of time on my hands. And so a lot of this, like the networking and doing stuff with the Institute of Directors and things like that, to a certain degree became quite a large part of my social life. And a lot of the people that I kind of was doing essentially voluntary work with are still to this day very, very close friends. I used my spare time to, invest in these sorts of things, and that, that's a choice and decisions that you make. But I had a lot of time and not a lot of money, so volunteering to be able to go to things that I otherwise might not be able to afford to go to, wonderful, great way of doing it. And then I negotiated. So when I joined Astute Electronics, so this was the role, Indian restaurant guy after I was made redundant. When I went in and spoke to him, he was like, yeah, I'll hire you, bring you in. I asked to work 4 days a week. And the reason I gave him for doing that was because I was so heavily involved in the IOD at that time, and also a startup called Your Town. But it was the IOD I sold him on. I said, I want to spend a day a week working on this Institute of Directors stuff as a volunteer, because I'm finding it really beneficial and good for my learning. So I'd like to do that. And not only did he say yes, he said, I won't change your salary because I think it's probably quite useful for me. I think it's that you being involved in the Institute of Directors might benefit us. So we'll just, yes, you can have a day a week where you can work on that stuff. And so I was very fortunate with that. And so I was working in roles where I negotiated. And when I first joined Planet Mark, I was 4 days a week. And that gave me sort of an extra day to work on other things, other projects. These days it's transitioned away from, so initially it was I had loads of time. Then it was I managed to create time. And then more recently it's everything's aligned. So there isn't a single thing that I now do with kind of things that are, they're hobbies to me. They're fun. I enjoy them. But people would see them as side hustles or, additional extracurricular activities that I'm taking on. They're all so aligned to what I do in my role within Planet Mark that they add value to it. And I have the blessing and support of the business to invest my time into them. So much so that Planet Mark incubates the Carbon Accounting Alliance. I have support from members of the team within Planet Mark. They've helped cover the costs underpinning some of the platforms and stuff we're using and stuff like that. So I've got a lot of support, but that's in large part because everything is coalesced around, if I need to understand what the rest of our industry are doing, if I want to be able to engage with policymakers or have a policymaker or a standard setter come and tell us about what they're thinking and what they're working on, I can try and do that from within my Planet Mark role, but a standard coming in one-to-one explaining to me what they're doing, what they're working on, it's a big ask. If I say, I'd like you to present in front of an audience of 100 different people from within the industry, they jump at the opportunity like I've done them a favor.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So it works really well for accelerating the things that I need to do in my job anyway, so that I'm actually more effective in my role. So now it's very aligned. I still probably work a bit too much, but it kind of all supports one another. So it's changed over time. And so depending upon different people's circumstances, a different thing will be appropriate. But in the very least, you can allocate a certain amount of your spare time to saying, I'm going to invest in my own. It was investing in myself. I was investing in my learning. I was investing in my growth. I was investing in my network.
Sure, understood. There's so much I want to cover off about Planet Mark, but I'm mindful of our time. So I'm going to pick a few of the questions that I had down here for you. So I suppose, firstly, you are responsible for thought lead, as you've described, the thought leadership around policy development, around sustainability. What would you say are some of the biggest gaps in the sustainability narratives that exist right now that perhaps need more attention?
How long have we got? Ooh,
2
what
minutes.
am I going to pick? There's a lot of things that I could do to answer that question. I think we still haven't reached the stage where sustainability action, climate action has become systemic. It's still the case that it's happening. It's happening more and more commonly, but it's still somewhat pockets. So, like Carbon Accounting Alliance, we've learned that we have over 500 members in 47 countries. Most of the big players in the carbon accounting sector are now part of it. And collectively, we measure somewhere between 85,000 and 110,000 companies globally. Now, that's exciting in one way because that's more than quadruple the closest, nearest other kind of measurement disclosure tool type thing that exists, like CDP. But also only 85,000? There are 5.8 million businesses in the UK alone. Like, we've got a real challenge of scale to tackle here. And so I think there's something around, for it to become a, societal kind of shift, we are yet to reach the tipping point in which it becomes an exponential cascade that just absolutely rockets. When you think about that hockey stick of adoption or the S-curve of adoption, it's felt like it's accelerated a lot, but I still think we're only at the low end of the S-curve. So I think I'm keen to see that shift take place. I think some of that will come from simplification and improvement of tools to support these things. Some of it will come from societal understanding and experiences of climate change. The hurricane that has landed in Florida, it's a prime example of people are really waking up to the impact this is going to have, not on our grandkids, not on our kids, on us in our lifetimes. And, that was really what drew, I made the decision to switch into sustainability. I proactively went after it. I went and did a course with the Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership. I started mindfully networking in this space and connecting with this space and learning about the space because I wanted to get into it, because I felt this was the biggest challenge that faced our civilization and had ever faced our civilization. And I wanted to invest my time and energy in being part of the solution to that. So, so I think that societal shift is still something that we're working on. We will reach a tipping point where it will become the norm, but we're not there yet.
Sure, understood. I think we're going to have to do a part 2 because there's lots of unanswered questions that I have that I'd like to follow up with you on. But critically, and I think it's sort of the answer you've just given lends itself nicely into this final one, which is around how you personally want to leave the world better than you found it. Clearly, by making that shift, it's something that's really important to you. But when you do step back and look at your career in its entirety, what would be some of the key things that you'd like to have achieved to know personally that you've left the world better than you found it?
So I have a specific visual goal. So I enjoy and do quite a bit of sort of meditation and practice various different forms of meditation and things. But what the visualization, it came to me a number of years ago during a meditation that I kind of use quite a lot in kind of motivating myself and just getting through some of the harder times, because standing face to face with climate change on a daily basis can be tough. Like it's hard on your mental health. The visualization I have is that because climate change this is a scientific endeavor, we will know probably 2 or 3 years after it happens when we have succeeded. We will know. The data will show us. We will see that the emissions will be coming down. We will see that temperatures start stabilizing. We will be able to measurably see that things are changing and shifting. And so there will be a room that is announced in. And so I have this in my mind, this room in which the announcement is made that we have done it. We're past the worst of it. We've turned the tables around. Things are improving. We're not out of the woods yet, but we are succeeding in tackling the climate crisis. I want that to happen in my lifetime, and I want to be in the room where it's announced. And in my mind, this is a huge auditorium with thousands of people in it, because this is the biggest issue of our time, certainly by that time. And on stage, there are scientists who are all wearing lab coats because they're scientists. climate scientists do not wear lab coats, but this is my visualization, so they'll wear what I want them to. And so a bunch of scientists, men and women in lab coats, are on stage, and one of them steps up to the microphone and goes, "We're delighted to announce that we've done it." And I'm in the room for when the crowd goes wild and everyone celebrates, and champagne popping, organic champagne,
yes,
and in recycled glass bottles. So that's my visualization. That's what, when I think about what success looks like for us, for our sector, for our industry, that's what I hope for. We've had I remember a conversation that a couple of years ago at Planet Mark, which is also really interesting, is in principle, because we could solve it. Right? If we solve it as a society, we could reach a point where we do ourselves out of a job. Done. Carbon emissions, we've dealt with them. They're done, finished. And so we're all sort of asking, well, what would you do? What would you do if we succeed? Like, what would you do? What career would you have then? And lots of people have different answers to that question. So that, for me, success is doing myself out of a job.
Sure. You'd have to go back to the Indian and wait for someone to pass your business card again.
Yeah. I need to go and get some more business cards on dates. Yeah.
Great. Well, look, thank you so much for your time. I'm sure this will have appealed to a wide audience. But particularly those that are sort of on the journey of their career and perhaps haven't quite yet found the place that they think that is the best place for them, that it will really resonate with. So if there are people listening that want to reach out or engage with you in some capacity, are you happy for them to do so? And if so, where would be the best place for them to connect with you?
Yeah, of course. I'd be pretty hypocritical if I now said, no, I don't want to talk to anyone.
Yes.
Don't connect with me, for God's sake. LinkedIn. LinkedIn is probably the best place, because then we can connect up. I can see your stuff, you can see my stuff. And we can sort of be in each other's ecosystems.
Brilliant. Excellent. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing how the journey continues, and also that visualization now is imprinted into my mind. So I'll be waiting for that day, and looking forward to watching it.
It will happen. You wait. And they'll be wearing lab coats because I'll force them to.
Exactly. But thank you so much for your time. It's great to talk it through, and wishing you all the best. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Better Than We Found It. I hope you have found value from this to support your own purpose-led journey. This episode was brought to you by GS2 Partnership, my organisation focused on providing talent solutions for sustainably focused organisations. We are driven by our purpose of connecting the people who believe in leaving the world better than we found it. If you are looking for a partner to support you with your hiring plans, or you are looking for your own career next steps, please reach out to us or personally drop me a message on LinkedIn. It's great to hear from listeners to the podcast, and I'd welcome the opportunity to talk to you. Thank you very much, and stay tuned for our next episode.